Welcome from across all the time zones that we have participating in this discussion today. Thank you so much for joining us on behalf of Craft in America. We're thrilled to be hosting this talk today with Roelof Uys and Jeff Oestreich in conjunction with our Humble Legacy exhibition, which is part of a two-part exhibition focusing on the You Know Me as a form and the legacy of Leach in the role of studio ceramics history over these past 100 years. So welcome, Roelof and Jeff. Just a couple announcements I wanted to share first. The exhibition is now virtual and on the Craft in America website, and we have a 360 view. We have images of all the objects in the show, and we will be introducing additional materials over these next couple of weeks. So please check in and join us again. And for those of you that aren't on our email list, you can join that, subscribe on our website to get notifications as more material comes through. So to begin, Jeff Oestreich is an acclaimed Minnesota potter and has a deep history with Leach. He was an apprentice from 1969 to 1971, and he has taught numerous students and potters over the years and shared the Leach message through his work. And Roelof Uys is the lead potter at Leach currently, and began his career in South Africa and came to the UK in 1998 and has been the lead potter since 2013. So we will be having a discussion that is very much cross-generational and international. And just to begin, let's start with your experiences, Jeff. So you're really in this 100-year history of Leach that we're celebrating this year. You were there at a midpoint and at a very vibrant time in the pottery's history. Can you share just a little bit about how you arrived there to start and what it was about Leach that, you know, drove your interest that time as a young potter?
I remember in 1968, I went into Warren McKenzie's office and I said, Warren, I want to be an apprentice at the Leach Pottery. So he wrote a letter of introduction. I got on the plane in 1968 and was interviewed by Janet first and then Bernard. And they said, yes, we have a space, come back in a year's time. So I finished my degree and I flew over. Warren didn't clue me in at all about what that apprenticeship was about. He just didn't talk about it. So I thought it'd be this little charming little experience where he'd have tea on the lawn and maybe go swim in the afternoon. But it was an apprenticeship in the truest sense of the word. As a freshman in college, we had to buy the Potter's book right back here, and that became our Bible. And we just worshiped Leach and Hama, that whole school of thinking. And I knew early on that I would be a potter, and so I just thought I need to get the best training possible. So I went off to England, and I think of the years there as the kind of the golden years in that everyone was well trained. Bernard still worked in the afternoon. He was in his early 80s. The amount of pots that were produced was incredible. The flow of pots, and it was just a really exciting time. And what I remember well was how we got to rub shoulders with the world's great Lucy Reed came to visit, and we go up to Carter's and Fire's kiln. So there was a wonderful exchange among the potters in England, and I think of that often.
And Roelof, can you talk about your beginnings at Leach?
Well, yeah, I mean, my journey here kind of started in South Africa about in the early 90s when I just started working as a potter, as a studio potter, and I had no clue what I was doing really, and so I went to this arts festival in the Eastern Cape, which is quite a kind of, oh, hello, can you see me? But anyway, I met her, and I was looking at other potters' work, and there was a potter. I saw this kind of interesting work, and there was this weird little cup which I have here, which I was looking at, and it was kind of an odd thing, and I'd never seen a Unomi or to me what this is, and ended up giving it to me, and I just traveled with me for all my career pretty much.
Make sure they're not reverbing.
It had an accident, and anyway, it's broken. But so, and that's kind of where I was sort of introduced to the Hamada Leach movement. And I came to England in 1998. Worked in London in a pottery for a while, which made just traditional garden pots, and I moved down to St Ives in 1999, and I worked with another former student of Bernard's, John Bedding, and I was he set up the Jail Yard Studios in town, and I worked there for 14 years, and in 2017 the position came up as senior production potter, which then later became lead potter, and yeah, I was lucky enough to be given the opportunity, and I've been here almost over 7 years now, and so yeah, that's kind of my how I got to the Leach story in a concise way, I guess.
I think for both of you, as particularly significant examples of potters who have had this belief philosophy speak very strongly to you, could you each talk a little bit about what your understanding was, maybe Jeff, in terms of prior reading and versus the experience that you had once you arrived at the pottery, and what you in person really learned about the Leach philosophy and him himself?
Yes, I was fully entrenched in the whole Leach philosophy from the very beginning because of the book that we were required to read. And what I read into the book was the romance of being a potter. And I remember going to Warren Mackenzie's house. I was a freshman in college.
That was good.
Time, and I went in for coffee, and I just looked around and said, I want this life. I just knew that was a life I wanted, thanks to Warren. And I still romanticize about my time there, and I still think that the Leach Pottery is my well, where I go to every 3 or 4 years to do a residency and to visit friends. I still go back to the shrine and honor the tradition.
And Roelof, in terms of South Africa, I mean, part of the goal of this exhibition, this moment of celebrating the centennial, is the idea of looking at how this has been internationally significant. Did you read the book? What was your understanding there? Did it have an impact?
Well, I met these, like I said earlier, I met this potter and a few others at this arts festival, and then about a year later I ended up in Cape Town looking for a studio, and I looked these guys up, and this kind of and they were all students of Michael Cardew in particular, and people who had visited St Ives in the 70s, and so it was for me it was completely new. It was I hadn't read the Potter's book or anything like that, so at that point, and so I just really liked the kind of lifestyle these guys had. They were kind of I don't know. It was kind of, I don't know. It was a beautiful way of living, I thought. And there was a kind of independence, and they were we were just making pots, and but these pots had a kind of a sort of, I don't know, a lovely carefree swagger to them, a sort of, but with a respect for the user, and I just thought it was a brilliant. And that I started my journey of learning about this tradition through these guys, and yeah, the fact that it's I think often it's quite difficult to define the kind of the Leach Hamada movement, I think, because in many ways it's made up of the people that have come and trained here, and for me, I never had a direct relationship with Bernard Leach. I was 5 years old when he died, so living in another continent, so I wouldn't, I'd no direct connection. So for me, the value it's really in the people who came here and worked here, and for that time, for like Jeff, for a few years, all these people were in this one space, and Bernard created this place where kind of creativity can flourish. And I think, that's for me, it's the most enduring legacy of Leach is the people that grew this movement out of just working together, which I think is, that for me is amazing.
Jeff, sorry, go ahead.
The one thing I'm aware of, we've been sheltering in place now for a number of months. And to me, I feel these last months have been the sacred time of being alone most of the time with just me and the couple cats and going out just to minimal things, and how it's given me a lot of time to think about my life and my experience at the Leach Pottery, and how now being still making pots every day, I'm thinking, wow, this is a payoff of all that training. Is I get to still live this life out in the country, so not much has really changed. I'm so glad that I went through that training, which prepared me to live this life, and I'm doing.
I'd love to know a little bit more about the potters who were there, specifically when you were there initially, because I know you had a lot of very formative experiences with the individuals who were there, and then certainly over time as well. But can you talk a little bit about Ichino and Bedding, who were also there at the same time, and who was operating the pottery? We're sharing a couple of your images from 50 years ago now, which is shocking to say. That's where we're at in 1970 here.
When I think of my time there, it was right about at the 50th year, right in the middle of their history. And as I said, it was just the golden years when Janet was managing the place, and she had figured out how to run it. It was just running very smoothly. The orders came in, there was prosperity, and people came from all over to visit. And so it was just so rich in that regard. And I just lost my train of thought. Imagine that.
This is actually, we're on an image of Clary Illians right now. Just want to mention.
And I also realized that there's only 2 people surviving from that period I was there. They're all gone, except for John Bedding and a woman who was Janet's assistant. And when I was looking at this photograph on the screen of these people, I recognized a few, and there's probably only one person out of the whole group that's still alive. But
Can you go through and identify who we're looking at?
On the far left, oops, the screen is in the way. It's blocking. On the far left is John Reeve, who was a apprentice there in the 50s, a little bit after Warren. They became very good friends. He passed away maybe 10 years ago. And then there's Bernard, Hamada's wife, and Janet, the first time I've ever seen her in a skirt. And I think in the back top of the hat, I think that might be Warren McKenzie. I'm not sure. Well, behind Bernard is Bill Marshall, who his role at the Pottery was to train in the apprentices. He had a major role there. There we go. Okay. So that's all I can identify of the people.
That's great. And within the exhibition, we have you know me by many of these individuals. So, and we'll be able to delve more deeply into each of their roles through what we'll be covering in these coming weeks. That's such a great shot of you as well. I guess in terms of, I'd love to talk a little bit about utilitarian pottery and the ideas that existed then and the existence of them now. The show is about cups, and I wonder how the functional object and in terms for each of you in what your vision is for making a cup in this day and age, and what you take away, how you may or may not fit within some things that you've learned through the Leach Pottery example in your work in that sense. So utilitarian pottery in this day and age, where are we? Big question.
All I can speak about is for myself, and being a lover of food and cooking and entertaining, the pots are just central to that activity. And when I look at the objects in my home, there are really not many extraneous objects. It's all objects that have some function. So the function, and going on to training there, where function was just at the core of the experience, that now is just part of my DNA. And if someone gave me a slab of clay and said, make sure, I would know where to begin. But with the pot, you just make a cylinder, and that starts to suggest a cup or a pitcher or something like that. So to me, it's just it's got these knowns that one starts with.
Roelof?
Yeah, I mean, I trained as I guess I wanted to become a painter, when I set out to be an artist, and I sort of fell into ceramics, and by accident in a way. And I'm happy with those kind of accidents. And it's taken me many years to kind of, for the longest time, I still had in the background this idea, no, I need to be a painter. I need to do, to make art. And it's only the last maybe 15 years when I started realizing that I can do as much with my craft of ceramics as I can do I can say what I would have wanted to say through painting. So. And there is this kind of the thing I quite like, that it's, from my point of view, I'm thinking about the shape. The function is obviously really important, but it's and I enjoy making it. I enjoy the process, and I enjoy the effects that you can achieve, and I enjoy spending time on pots. For me, they're little works of art, but for someone else, it's just a cup, and that's okay, and that's what I like about the craft. It's like, it's kind of a humble craft, which is fine. I like the way, for relatively little money, you can sort of sneak these little works of art into people's lives that they're very intimate with. I mean, it's cups and bowls and plates that we make. And I think it's something quite special about that. It's sort of, it's just kind of under the surface. It's not, it's not elevated or put on pedestals or anything. And that again is something that speaks to my character, I guess. It's that, you can, I don't know, and it's great to be able to just make something out of mud, out of earth, and knowing the sort of secrets of combining water and fire and these things, and making this thing, which can mean a lot to somebody, or it could just be a functional thing that they drink their tea out of, or keep their toothbrush in, or whatever. I quite like that, and that's what appeals to me. And I think that continues now, and I think recently, I think people are looking again at things that are made by hand as opposed to machine-made things. This kind of impersonal, mass-produced things, and I think that sort of, I think people are rediscovering that, that there's that quality of somebody else's hand, on the thing that you're using is transcends. It's another way of us communicating.
One thing that I've thought a lot about lately, as I started to sew a couple years ago. Now I'm making copper and brass spoons for some of my pots. I'm learning how to use those materials. I think what we're circling around is this love of materials, whether it be, I went to the fabric store a couple of days ago, and I just wild in there. These bolts of fabric. I had just so much fun. I'm making masks now, and yeah, masks. They're functional, and they have to. I think of the mask. I've made many different designs and used different materials. Just trying to find a mask. It's like finding the perfect cup. That's got to be interesting and beautiful. Have the imprint of the maker, but it also has to function. And that same thing applies to a mask. I want this mask to filter well, but it has to be beautifully made and interesting, and that people will want it. And I think it's just the same of it's just this love of, oh, Marty just brought me this latest series of salt cellars with copper spoons and brass spoons I've been making. So it's about another material. I've always loved copper and brass as material. I've always loved fabric and textile. So it's just this love of materials and putting them together, which I think drives me. It could be clay or it could be something else, but that's just this basic love of materials. The challenge of using them is what keeps me going.
I wonder for you, how, for both of you, how in studio ceramics, the repetitive process, how you find your individuality in that. How for you, Jeff, how much room there was for any individuality when you were there at Leach, for instance, and how that fed into your forming your individual outlook in terms of pottery.
What was that? Our training was about doing production wear. We were taught to do cups or whatever it might be. You'd train on one particular form and you'd study it. You'd make thousands of it, and then you move on to another form. And that was a very disciplined training. And then the division was then evenings and weekends we'd make pots of our own design. But when I look back at those pots of our own design, they were straight out of the catalog. They were just what was made by the person next to, because it was a small, incestuous group of people. That's what we looked at, and that's what we learned from. But when I think of today, the work, how it's changed over the course of the decades, if you strip away the Art Deco decoration, you strip away the fastening, the bones of the pots are still right out of the whole Leach school, but they've just been dressed up and disguised. And that's something that one sense of form and proportion, after you go through this rigorous training, that's just within your DNA. You can't ignore it. You just have to work with it and around it to find your individual spirit.
Can you describe some of the qualities that you would, that we attribute to the Leach aesthetic in that sense? Balance, proportion, simplicity. Yeah.
Right. It's hard to put your finger on it. It has to do with honesty to the material, not overworking of the material, more of a fresher, direct approach. And not excessive use of pattern. It's just pots that have a sturdiness to them that one just feels a need to use them. They were not fragile by any sense at all. They're rugged pots that were destined to be on tables and in dish drainers and knocked up a bit. And
that's our kind of ethos, our making ethos, I guess. But like you said, and then you add to that, and you so yeah, I think that's probably the central thing. So it's kind of it's always, I think I like I don't like in a way the restriction of we make functional things. So there's obviously a limit to what you can make, otherwise you're starting to make sculptures, or something. So so there's always that consideration for that I think is it's important for the user. You want to make something that somebody's going to want to use, and that, so there's a lot of the way it looks, the way it feels in the hand, the way it works. You know, is it a good cup, or you know, is it you know the lip of the cup where your mouth touches it? Does it sit not comfortably in your hands? All those things, I think, and we still work like that. I think often, you know, because we work similarly to how they used to work in the past. So the studio, we train people and through making a standard wear, which is fairly simple and easy to make. I wanted to create design a standard wear that is easy to make, and so that people can learn within that you know, with to express, I guess, within those shapes. There's room for expression, but it is obviously constrained. And I think through that, you know, and it is that repetition thing. Once you've made hundreds and hundreds of egg cups or mugs or something, you kind of after that to do your own work, you're set free. You have you understand the materials, and so you're kind of free to go with that any way you want to, which, you know, which I think is, I think it's a lot. I think that's in many ways one of the secrets of that Leach tradition, is that rigorous training and repetition that gives you the tools to then go on to work in a free way, in an expressive way. If you have that sound basis, I think so. Yeah, I think it's. I hope, I don't know. You know, I was never around in those times, but I hope that I'm doing the tradition. You know, I'm staying as true to the tradition as I can, I guess, through the way we work in here now.
Yeah, well, and I wonder, in terms of you as a designer now for Leach, you know, how much room you have, you know, how you approach that process, you know, working within the tradition, keeping that tradition alive, but what kind of room for reinvention do you have?
Yeah, well, it's strange. Like, so in many ways, when I started, yeah, I'd never really managed a workshop or designed a range or anything like that, except for my own work. So in a way, I had to learn to do that while kind of trying to run a workshop. So, and so I think the first, you know, at first, I guess maybe sometimes it's just like, yeah, it almost seems harder now to do new things, and I don't quite understand why. But you know, I think it's learning that, you know, in the early days you come up with things that work well if you just make one or two, but then if you're trying to make 100, it gets really complicated. And so those kind of factors now comes into play when I'm designing things. So yeah, so it's kind of, you know, I kind of lost my train of thought there, sorry. But yeah, so for example, we're doing for this year, for 2020, for the centenary celebrations, I'm doing 100 of, so I'm making, to start with, I'm doing 100 unomis, and then I'll be doing 100 bowls and then plates. And so I'll be making about, well, I'm aiming to do 1,200 pots within the year, each a functional piece. So maybe working my way up to teapots or something. And that's really fun because I can just take everything I've learned over the last 7 years and apply that. And yeah, I'm really enjoying doing that because in a way I'm kind of free to, and hopefully out of that will come new work that will translate into what the studio makes. That's my first project. So that's just, well, roughly 100 unomis in Bernard's studio, which again it's really nice to be able to have the honor of working in there while we're effectively on lockdown. So usually we teach classes in there, but at the moment, due to social distancing, we're not doing that. So I get to work there, which is great.
Let's see. I would love to talk about this issue of the you know me, the word you know me, the definitions of you know me that exist out there. what does it mean to each of you? What is Unomi? What is cup? What is tea bowl? What is teacup? And I think some of it also has to do with translation of a concept of what, the Unomi is in terms of Japanese tradition transferred via UK to the US to all other parts of the world. But how would you define the Unomi? What do you think the Unomi means now in terms of your work or the Leach pottery work?
My experience, the first time I went to Warren Mackenzie's house, he said, come in for coffee. And he poured the coffee in a couple of Unomis. I didn't know what a Unomi was. I thought he made a cup and he forgot to put the handle on it. And it wasn't until I went to England and Janet Leach, during the weekend, she would make pots in the studio. She'd come in with a Hamada Unomi with coffee. And I happened to have, it was sold at the auction, and Janet passed away. It was auctioned off and she passed away. And this is what she drank out of. And she showed me how it was to be used to not burn your fingers on the hot cup. And it was, you'd hold it from the foot ring and then the lip, take a few sips, and then as it cooled down a bit, you could embrace it and feel the warmth of it. And so that, oh, okay. And it was shortly after that when Shingi Ichino arrived. He was from Tamba, Japan. And this is a picture of him when he was a little bit older. And so with him, he was from Tamba, where Janet trained in the early 50s. So he came to work with us, and with him, he brought the idea of the Unomi. And so he taught us about the Unomi. We began to make Unomis, and they were individual. They were sold in their standard word catalog, which is, they were number 51. You can see.
Higher.
Higher?
Yeah. Even higher. Yeah, great.
It just says in the description, it's a Japanese Unomi, a cup for drinking various liquids in. And how, to me, it was about, and we adhered then pretty closely to the Unomi format of being about 3.5 by 3.5 with a turned foot. And the foot's purpose was to be able to hold it when it was hot, then then it would cool down so you wouldn't burn your fingers. You just hold it that way. And why I loved making them, because I love to trim the pots. And so that part fit. And also being a lover of Japanese pottery, it's my kind of homage to Japanese pottery by making Unomis. And the fact is, I've only been in Japan about 2 days of my entire life, just passing through. But for some reason, this just connected to me. And what, to me, the challenge is how my Unomis have gotten double the size of what they used to be. I found one from about 50 years ago, just after I came back from England. This little guy here. And now they're much larger than that because I'm an American, but and thinking about Unomis, its introduction to America, it came through various sources. And so my interest is how it spread via the Leach pottery, via Hamada. And I found this cup of Warren's, this Unomi, I bought of his 50 some years ago. And to me, I was seeing how he produced a lot of these, and he called this a false foot. There's no trimming involved, but it just shows how a pot comes to America, and then we just began to challenge it, and we're not locked in tradition. So this was his attempt to make still along the Unomi proportions, and yet make them economical. He could whip them out, no trimming, and to the public to be able to have one. But just curious how this is a reflection of how Americans deal with what happens when traditional idea comes into our head, how we have the liberty to just race with it and change it. And this is by one of Warren Mackenzie's early grad students, and then Mark Ferris from 50 years ago. He began to tweak it. That's mine. And Josh DeWeese And his Unomi inputs came through Ken Ferguson. He was a student at the Kansas City Art Institute. So I think that's where he got the idea from. And Jack Doherty, who was the lead potter there when they reopened in 2005, his work is of a different ilk, but I still think that's along the lines of a tea bowl. And then next to that is Matt Foster, who works at the Leach, and how that's pretty close on to what we were taught in terms of the capacity and the dimensions of it all. So I'm just curious how he stuck pretty close to what we were taught 50 years ago. I'm just curious about that aspect.
Mm. The proportions of that, I think you're talking about the one that's second to the right over
Right.
Yeah. That seems close to the that we have from you, Roelof. And I wonder, how this, as you mentioned, Jeff, we Americans are big coffee drinkers and we have giant mugs, and it's such an American concept. What do you think about all of that, Roelof? How does that translate in the UK and people?
Well, I generally, I favor a small I've always, because the first one I got was a small. I don't know if you can see it. It was a small one, if it's, and also this potter gave it to me because nobody was buying them, because it didn't have a handle, and I drank all kinds of things out of this, and it traveled, and I just have and these are, that's how I discovered this tradition. And two things I love about is they kind of potters give these to each other, and they sort of travel through the potters community, and it's a language we speak, and we look at them differently to other people use them, I think, or look at them because we understand how they're made and what they're for. And I think it's just a lovely thing to most Unomis that's come my way has been gifts, and hopefully once I've given as well. They're sort of out there, but the size doesn't. I tend to just prefer making smaller ones because I don't know. I think there's some kind of beauty in the austerity of things, and also another reason why I like them smaller is because if you're drinking wine or something out of them, you can sort of visit the bottle a few times. If it's a big one, it's not gonna. I don't know, but I agree with Jeff about. I think in many ways Warren sort of set us free as well from tradition and the way he approached making these things. Because again, I've never been to Japan. I was hoping to go this year, but that won't happen now. Hopefully next year. And so this is all things that sort of that kind of tradition is only what I've been exposed to from reading and talking to people that's been there, and that. So I don't. And I also think it's a cup is it's a kind of essential thing that people have had for thousands of years, and I don't know, there's just something like really special about these. And what I was going to say about just the way American potters approach these things is that you are free to change it, and I think tradition is always a bit. It can be dangerous, just sort of sticking to a tradition. Or I know there's somewhere in my mind there's a kind of good saying about tradition. I can't remember that now, but I think I like the idea of reinterpreting things, and giving them new meaning. I didn't even know what these were called until a few years ago. This is a Unomi, but to me it's just a cup, these are my favorite kind of pots, and I would, if I could make a living just from making them, I would.
One thing that I'm aware of too is the Unomi is a daily pot that's used for hot, cold liquids. It's just picked up and used, and it doesn't have the onus of a tea bowl, which is about the formal tea ceremony. And I think of the the tea bowl as like a cup and saucer, the formality. I think of the unomi as a cup, just a daily one that we just use every day for multiple things, and it gets kind of, it can get kind of beat up, but it just becomes a friend to us. And I love the fact that it's a casually used vessel. But I had a show in Japan a while ago, and not one unomi sold because I have enlarged them. They're too large by their standard. I have kind of defaced them by doing notches and this and that. And Hamid would roll over in his grave if he ever saw them. And Bernard too. But what I find really interesting is how when you were researching Unomi, that Bernard, you only found one image of a Unomi that Bernard made when he was training in Japan about 1911, was it? There's just that one, but he did not make them. And I'm just thinking, why didn't he make them? Maybe he felt it was beneath him because he felt himself to be kind of an aristocrat. He came from a wealthier family and he was well educated. And the pots that he made were about exhibitions. They were showpieces. They weren't, he wouldn't make a stew pot or a coffee mug like this. He wouldn't. It was kind of beneath him. But so I'm just curious, Roelof, what your take is why Bernard didn't make the Unomis. It's just this odd how Hamid made them all the time, but Bernard, why do you think that is?
I don't know. I think, like I said, I never knew Bernard, but it might also have been that he was wary of because of the rich tradition in Japan of these. And I know they have kind of rules about unomis and tea bowls and things, and there's summer ones and different kinds of. And I think it might be one of those things. Bernard was maybe, like I said, I didn't know Bernard, and in a way it was a way of him maybe respecting that tradition, not attempting them, because I don't know. That's just a theory. I have no, because that was also curious to me, because there are no examples of Bernard Leach unomis, and yeah, so that's what I think. I'm not sure if that's true. Like so I didn't know Bernard's, but there might be an element of that as well, that he thought it might have been beneath him.
Ordinary of a pot to make.
Yeah, although I can't see. I think in many ways the most challenging thing to make, in a way, because it's so easy to make a really bad one, and so and so to make it, because and even now I think I hardly ever make a good one. I think for my personal, I feel I still have, I still haven't made like a really good one. Because it's it's the proportions, and it's you can play around with it, but there's definitely something. You can easily spot a good one and a bad one, and they're quite a challenge, I think. And
I think that the challenge is, how can you, in this 4 by 4 inch format, how can you personalize that? How you can give it a life and an interest so it stands alone. And to me, that's the hardest part. And I also think they're kind of a sketch pad for larger ideas. That when you make maybe 50 in a sitting, then you go, oh, maybe this, and you can translate that to a larger piece or different form altogether. So I think there's that aspect to which I
know, I agree. I've recently started making larger things based on the shapes of the unomis, and I think. And again, and sometimes the attempts are quite not so good, but occasionally I've scaled them up into large bowls, and they've worked really well. So they are, for me, they like you say, they're like a little sketchbook in one way. So this thing I'm doing for the Leach 100 celebrations, I was a bit apprehensive to start with unomis, but in a way, I kind of have no choice, because that will set the kind of in making 100, and each one is going to be different, and so that sort of journey will hopefully kind of build onto the next thing I'm going to make, and I'm going to learn things from making those and trying to make 100 different ones. So yeah, they are like sketches, because it's not a big deal if they go wrong. You know, they don't spend a lot of time on them. Yeah, I love so teacups or cups. You know, I prefer, and also we don't have to bother with a handle. You know, I hate putting handles on things. But yeah, so and I think also the handle, like, I mean, even cups that was made, if you look back historically in Europe, with the it's only a recent phenomenon, handles on cups, because they were disposable, essentially for the longest time. They were just, it's a thing you drink out of, and then when they break, you just chuck it to the side and get another one, So there was, I think it only became handle. I might speak under correction here, but I think handles on teacups only became a thing when tea started coming to Europe, and the Europeans didn't know how to drink this hot drink out of these little teacups. They didn't know how to hold it, and so they were like, "Oh, this is really interesting, but could we have a handle or something on it?" And so I think that's the kind of origin of the cup, with the handled cup, which I think, I'm sure there's lots of potters that enjoy putting handles on cups, but it does double the time in, almost in making. Whereas the unomis, and also you can really, making them is so much fun, because I always like making them in quantity. So I wouldn't just make 2 or 3. You make a whole batch of them, and you just start off the first few kind of not quite right, and then I love how they change as you go through the 100, because as opposed to when you're making standard ware, which we try and get everything the same, and how they evolve over there, and how new ideas, and then you also have the opportunity when you trim them to change the whole look of them sometimes, just with a different angle on the foot or something like that. I mean, for me, they just speak. I mean, in many ways, they are, I don't know, they're kind of one of the cornerstones of our tradition, I guess. And they, it's again, I like this idea of this tactile and visual language that we speak all over the world. Yeah.
One thing for me, the joy of Unomi is being able to trim that foot, and the timing tool. I just love that part of it. And
Yeah.
why?
Jeff, can you show a couple examples of some of the feet on the cups you have? There's a request to look at the Mackenzie foot, for instance, and talk about
with Bill Marshall, who trained me who made Unomis, and he, of course, was very influenced by Hamada. And so Bill had a special clay for Unomis that had a lot of sand in it. And I used these for years, but the trimming is just so alive here. Unless you really need to be in person to get the feet of what he's attempting to do here. But seeing they're soft, they've been repaired a number of times.
Hold it up a little bit higher so we can see. Yeah.
Retired, and these to me, but this one is strange. This is fired in an electric kiln. This is larger. So
Sorry.
Years ago, and how I was curious how he kind of broke his tradition, used an electric kiln, and increased the size quite a bit.
We have a request to hold those up higher as well. Just a little bit higher, closer to, yeah.
There we go, okay. There's a pattern right here.
Much better.
There's the foot.
Beautiful.
Very croggy clay.
Very. Fantastic. And flip it, yeah, great. Okay. And the Mackenzie example.
With the false foot.
Yeah.
I wish you were alive to talk to him about this. I was talking to Guillermo, who worked with him for 24 summers, and he said that Bernie would do that lift with the paint scraper. Somehow you do this and would give it that lift that you kind of me lift, but then it didn't require any trimming whatsoever.
Excellent. Thank you. I wonder, I would just love to also have you talk about Minnesota as this kind of leech colony within the U.S. Why? Why Minnesota? I mean, obviously you and Mackenzie individually sharing this whole approach, but more than that, why Minnesota? How did this happen?
I think there are a number of reasons. Well, Mackenzie was the first to move into the area in the early 50s, bought an old farmstead and began to make pots and educate people, developed the University of Minnesota program, and then his students, many have settled in the area, and he started the Northern Clay Center, and it just became known as a pottery center with a Leach kind of spin to it. And I think it's because you think of where Minnesota is comprised of Swedes and Germans, and their homes are lots of wood detail, wooden floors and woodwork. There's a warmth to that. And so pots just seem to fit into that kind of interior. Where our pots, to me, they always seem strange. These pots would seem strange in, let's say, a California house. One expects to be brightly colored pots and have a different feel to them, but these just seem to blend in with the interiors, and they're not shouting. And I think that's just kind of the nature of our area. That's just part of us.
And Roelof, and I maybe you went off to grab an example you want to show. But
No, I did, and then it was all the wrong ones. So I was mindful of not being away too long. So I was gonna show you some ones I'm making, but they're kind of all a bit boring because the feet are the same. And I wanted to grab some other ones which were more interesting.
Well, everyone will have to explore the Leach website as those.
Yeah. They're gonna start coming out. So I'm keeping a sort of record of them as I make them, and then depends which ones survive. Hopefully there'll be a few good ones in there. But yeah, I just love playing with it. So I mean, one of the ones I've been trying to play with, I don't know if it's going to be possible to see, is a kind of invisible foot.
You go a little bit higher, or
yeah, I kind of really like that idea of an invisible foot. So it can just sort of look like this floats above the table, for example. And then this one is kind of a classic foot, just this chunky foot. I don't know, the feet. Some days I do the feet really well, and then this is another shape with another kind of foot, a faceted one. So there's just so many things you can do with these to make them interesting, and play around with the aesthetic of them. But always you're restricted with, it's got to be something that someone can hold and use. So that's kind of cool.
One thing I'm thrilled that the Leach is now going to be producing more Yonomis as they did when I was there. There's this reintroduction to that, and it's kind of following this legacy. And also thinking about how when I worked there, the pots I made were a reflection of their diet. They did a lot of stews, grilling. They had egg cups, and they made ramekins, different sorts of stew pots, and they made grill plates and butter dishes, which was your ration of butter for that week. And they were basically connected to the diet. But now, as the diet has changed in England, I love the fact that you're making pots that reflecting how people are eating now, the pasta bowls and the espresso cups, and that's a reflection of how people are cooking now. And I think, but yet I look at the pots that there still is this echo of 50, 75 years ago. So there's that respect, something is carried with that, but it's been brought into the right century now. So that just, to me, is just so exciting.
yeah, we have just a couple moments left, about 5 minutes, and that idea of survival and of it carrying through over these 100 years, and just this overall interest in functional ceramics that I think is resurging more and more now today in this moment. Would love to hear about how the pottery has survived. You both were there and know that there's been moments of ups and downs, and I know now you're shifting to do a lot more sales online. We discussed Roelof, but yeah, this moment of pandemic and survival, how this will carry us through potentially, how Leach Pottery is gonna handle this time. Can you talk a little bit about your new efforts, Roelof?
Well, so obviously we're quite a large organisation now, and we have many aspects to it. So we have a kind of we have a participation element to what we do here, which is sort of teaching classes and night evening classes, and so a lot of those things we can't do at the moment. And also visitors to the museum isn't currently open. And the shops just opened about a week ago to the public by appointment. So we've had to really focus a lot of our sales online, which has worked well so far. So yeah, I mean it's going to be a challenge over the coming months and possibly years. It's I don't know. It's interesting to, well, I mean, you know, there's that old proverb of may you live in interesting times, and yeah, be careful what you wish for. I guess we're in it now. I think, you know, there's few movements or institutions that have lasted 100 years. And so I think, you know, we will endure, and you know, it's when this crisis first started. I remember we sort of shut the pottery down, and we were putting up shutters and, you know, over where we store up equipment, and it was kind of like, it was really strange. It was like a sort of coming war or something, and we had to go, you know, thinking like, am I even going to ever be back here again? You know, is this over? We were sort of grabbing things and recipes and things. You know, if we have to sort of, you know, start up again somewhere, you know, in a year or 2 years ago, we can do that. And so, yeah, and so I think that, and then obviously for some weeks the studio was shut. And you know that you know that we had this sort of time of reflection, I guess, which was very good. And you think, what's, you know, when there's sort of this crisis occurring in the world, and it's, you know, it's all, at first looked very scary, and it's still, I think, in many places. You know, what's the point of making pots? You know, it's kind of, you think like that, and then it's like, well, you know, it's I still don't really know, but I feel that, you know, that's kind of part of our spirit as humans, is to carry on and preserve these things, and you know, continue creating. That's kind of probably, the creation is probably the closest that we have to actual divinity, you know. And so I feel, you know, but by just carrying on, you know, we're in it, and we're you know, that's the key to survival, you know, so as best we can. So I think, yeah, I'm confident that we're going to see it through to the other side, hopefully. Yeah. It's you know, I can't, you know, I'm sort of, you know, if you reflect on the way the world was before this started, it wasn't like there's a lot of that I miss. You know, I miss being around people, and obviously you know, the opportunity, but you know, prior to this, there was a lot of kind of running around just for nothing, you know, and kind of, and now, you know, I think the situation we're in has made the world a lot more real, and I kind of relish that, you know. That's just because now we have to make decisions based on reality, which again, you know, I feel people that work in crafts and work with materials and working, I think the material itself is a kind of teacher and of about real things, as such. And so I feel that people that the artists and crafts people, you get a clearer understanding of the world you're in, and how to deal with adversity because of your experience with materials and processes. So I think I'm lucky to be surrounded by a very good team of people, and we're all determined to see it through. So I think I'm hopefully in 100 years' time, the Leach Pottery will still be here. I won't be, but there'll be someone else here talking about me. Hopefully, so.
Absolutely. Yeah. Jeff, do you want to share some final words as well? Thank you, Roelof.
I just think of, again, this time of this pandemic, how it's a time when the potters have all pulled together now. We're going to have some online group events, and how it's just put us to test. But we're creative people, so we'll survive this. We'll manage. And I also think of the Leach Pottery a couple times, and the potter is just on the verge of being bankrupt way back in the early part of it, and they survived it. We are survivors, and we find a way. And I am not a tech person whatsoever, but in 1 week I learned how to FaceTime, Skype, Zoom, GoToMeetings, UPS, pickup, clip and chip on a brand new computer. And that is it. But then Linda said, Jeff, you have to now start a web store. What's a web store? So okay. So I had to do a change in my attitude. Now I'm excited about it. It's just going to be just plates. I'm just going to show plates. Love making plates. So we just find a way to get through this, and we'll come out on top.
Yeah. Sharing pictures.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna say to Jeff how how amazing the potters in Minnesota are, and that community they have. And I kind of that I just wanted to echo that that community is it's a global community, but also on a smaller scale, potters near you, we all help each other, we all work together, and yeah, and like Jeff said, as creative people, we know how to solve problems. So
yeah, I think there's something very hopeful to keep in mind, that the audience today is people from all over the world who care about objects, who care about functional objects, and want those in our lives, and whether we're makers or the consumers and users of them. So we're all tied together by that need. And the cup is the object that we touch the most in our daily lives. So yeah, so thank you. On that note, I think we're starting to see people heading out as we close. If there's any additional thoughts you'd like to add, feel free, either of you. Jeff, were you going to say something?
Yes, I was. And as I was going through a catalog today of when Janet died, her possessions were auctioned off. And I did not know this until recently, when maybe you or Nikki said that, so often when someone was married, they'd be given as a gift, and one would be larger, one smaller. That was new to me. I thought I knew quite a bit about, I didn't, so I'm learning things. And I found in the catalog, Janet had, but I didn't know she had this, his and hers that were shimokas.
Lovely, Mayoto.
So it's been a delight to talk about and help curate this exhibition about the Unomi. It's deepened my love of them.
Well, thank you so much, Jeff, for all your help in planning this exhibition, in identifying artists who have held true to the Leach philosophy, the cup as an object in their practices over these years. Can't thank you enough. And Roelof as well. So cheers, good evening to you.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much for giving us just a little taste of where Leach Pottery is right now in this day and age, and sharing your work with us. So thank you to both of you. And I encourage everybody to visit the website, look at Jeff and Roelof's objects and everyone else's who is part of these exhibitions, and much more to come. So thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.